Hey guys, my name is Michael and I'm the co-founder and strategy director at Yoga Digital. I hope you've all been keeping safe and well during these rather uncertain times. I wanted to thank you first and foremost for tuning in to learn a little bit more about conversion optimization. I have decided to take the opportunity to put a business shirt on for the first time in 4 or 5 weeks, and honestly I feel like an entirely new human, so thank you so much for giving me that excuse. So I figure we may as well just jump straight in. Today, first I'm going to cover a little bit about yogurt, then I'll set the scene and talk a little bit about the world that we're living in today and why data is more important than ever, and then we'll talk about conversion optimization in earnest and the role that it plays in any effective digital marketing strategy. So, jumping straight in. So one of the big things that we found in my last decade in digital is that a lot of companies have an understanding of what is happening, but they don't necessarily understand why it's happening. And the why is the most important part. It's the critical link, because the why is what allows you to build actionables. So as an agency, we're very dedicated to understanding the why. And one of the ways that we do that is through conversion optimization. And the conversion optimization process allows us to not just tell you why something is happening, but then to build actionable roadmaps that allow you to drive revenue growth or drive more conversions. So our tagline as an agency is a love affair with data, not opinions. We are firm believers that data in its most distilled form is in fact the voice of your customer. And whether it's in boardrooms or meeting rooms or in brands all over the world, unfortunately, the voice of the customer is often underrepresented and sometimes it's not heard at all. And so for us, what we feel that sets us apart is that we're here to tell you the customer story to your team, to your business, to understand what it is that they expect from you and from your digital experience so that you can translate that into an effective strategy. In terms of the brands that we work with, I think we don't really have a specific vertical that we specialize in. We have a methodology that we feel can work with any industry, and that's allowed us to work with some household brands and some brands that you might not have heard of. But regardless, by using that methodology, we're able to give them so much more information about what's happening in their business that we become an incredibly effective agency partner across a multitude of channels. So that's a little bit about us. Now let's talk about the world that we're living in today. When I was first thinking about putting this presentation together, coronavirus hadn't really kicked in earnest. So there's definitely going to be a bit of a theme as we go through this and understanding the role that pandemics play as well. But at its core, there's a few real hard truths that I think that we need to start with. The first is that people come to your website for a reason. They've come to take a specific action, and that might be learning more about your brand, learning more about a product, that might be researching a product, or it might be actually taking the specific conversion action, which might be to purchase or to inquire or to download a white paper or subscribe to an email marketing list. But unfortunately, it's often that the process between landing on the website and then taking the desired action is incredibly convoluted, and there's a lot of friction points that happen in between. So it's important to make it as easy as possible to get from point A to point B. The second hard truth is that you're actually no longer being compared to your competitors. You're now being compared to the most incredible digital experiences that customers have all over the world. So as an example, I recently bought a wallet from Bellroy, and they have an exceptional digital experience. But then I might then go and compare that. If I need to buy something from JB Hi-Fi, they wouldn't be in the same category, but at the same time, I'm still going to be comparing those digital experiences. So when you think about the number of websites that people go to and the amount of information and experiences that they're holding on to and downloading, there's a lot for brands to kind of stick to and hang on to and learn about in order to implement from their own experiences and catch up. Now, the last hard truth, and this is a stat that really always blows me away, is that there's $92 spent on acquisition for every $1 that's spent on conversion. Now, where this becomes even more prevalent during a pandemic is that some brands have really suffered, while other brands have become even more competitive. If you were selling hand sanitizer or toilet paper or alcohol, it becomes, or gym equipment, electronics, it becomes a very crowded market where a lot of people are churning out content and it's very competitive. And so you don't really have a lot of control over what's happening at the top of the funnel, but the bottom of the funnel is entirely within your control. Once someone lands on your website, you have full autonomy over the experience that they have with your brand. And yet it's the one part of the funnel that customers spend, or where brands rather spend the least amount of time on. So we've all seen a graph like this or a funnel like this. It's the traditional conversion funnel, going from awareness, interest, desire, and action. But this isn't a realistic representation of how customers shop today. Now it's a process that looks a little bit more like this. This is today's reality. You bounce between research and intent and discovery and consideration. You're spending a lot of time in comparison, and between needing to acquire new customers and nurture new customers, it's not a straight line to conversion. So brands need to be more across what are the pain points and motivations that customers have so that they understand how to move them between these stages more effectively. But also so that they understand from a channel mix, how many times do they need to be targeting these customers and across what channels to get them from this very convoluted conversion funnel and bounce them between them to get them to ultimately buy something from you. So in terms of the common issues that we hear about as an agency all the time, it ranges from we haven't been collecting any customer data, it's just not something that we've ever done, all the way through to we're collecting data, we know how to analyze it, and we have the resources to execute, we just happen not to be, and everything in between. I would say that in between is usually where people spend the most amount of, or where I guess we have the most amount of experience with customers, where they usually have some data but they don't know what to do with it, or they have the data and they know what to do with it, but unfortunately they just don't have the time and resources, and so they rely on an agency partner like us. But these are all very common issues, and for us, they all tie into the importance of conversion optimization, because all of those issues can be solved either internally, but mostly they're solved through processes. And so I'm going to walk you guys through this now. So what is conversion optimization? Well, it is the systematic approach for improving user experience in order to get people to take a desired action. So really, if you had to distill it down into a really simple sentence, conversion optimization is about crafting customer journeys that convert. So when you think about what that looks like as a process, it usually starts with a very general problem. So let's take coronavirus out of it because it's a very, I guess, strange situation and not something that most of us have encountered before. But day to day, let's say that you are a brand where your revenue has been dropping over the course of the last year, or you've redesigned your website and you've seen a drop in conversion rate. So that starts as your general problem. We are losing revenue year on year. So we would then use a series of different data sources and data collection methods to start building an understanding of what it is that's been happening and why those things have been happening. So that's kind of discovery and research. And then the insights is the why component. And what we're trying to do is now create specific problems from your general problem. So your general problem, again, is revenue is dropping year on year. A specific problem might be we redesigned our website and we have a new checkout process, which is maybe more clunky than what we were anticipating. Our page speed has slowed down and our organic rankings have disappeared. And we're not sure why that is. So we've now kind of turned that into more specific problems. The next component is the ideation, validation, and execution. So we would then go and build a testing strategy based on the research and the insights that we have. So what we would start doing is trying to understand, okay, if we were to optimize your images, or if we would display the images differently, would that both improve page speed and also increase conversion rate? If we were to provide a better user experience in the checkout flow, if instead of making it so clunky and asking unnecessary questions, if we were to really simplify that and distill that and push people through the checkout process faster, would that allow people to convert easier? Or maybe there's issues on the product page. There's less content on the new website than there was on the old website. And so your organic listings have gone, but also with less content, there's more information about the product. So customers seem less intent on buying from you. And so that's when we start generating specific solutions. Let's trial a new product page that has significantly more content, or where it has links to your blog. Let's try a one-page checkout instead of a 3-step checkout. Let's try presenting images in a better way. Do we need them to be so high res, or can we provide a slightly less high res version of the image, a lower res version, where it still gives the customer all the information they need, but we can now improve page speed, which happens to be an SEO factor as well as a UX factor. So that's how we kind of turn general problems into specific solutions using data and research. So when we talk about research, there's a few different methods that we're usually talking about. So we look at it both from a qualitative perspective, but then also from a quantitative perspective. So the quantitative side, again, tells us a lot about what is actually happening. It's the numbers. The qualitative side is what tells us why things are happening. And it's where we often find a lot of companies go wrong when it comes to, data analysis and conversion optimization practices, is that they usually only go with either qualitative or quantitative, but the real strength is in doing both of them and then matching them up to see if you can validate, ideas and hypotheses that you learn from one research method with another research method. So what we're talking about here, are just some of the methods that we look at. So you've got heat scroll and click maps, you've got session recordings, you've got customer surveys, you've got pop-up surveys on the website, live one-on-one interviews with customers, card sorting if you have a particularly complex navigation system is a really fantastic tool, and then everything from user journey mapping, competitor landscape analysis, analytics modeling. So there's quite a lot of ground that gets covered. It is very, very in-depth research, but what we're really looking for are trends and patterns. And this is why we have so many different research methods and why it's so important for anyone who's doing conversion optimization to be using multiple research methods. Because you need to be able to have enough data to identify trends and patterns across different research methodologies. And as an example of that, if we do an interview with a customer or a series of customers, and all of them tell us that they find the home page to be too long and too complex, and it makes it too difficult, like it hasn't been clear enough on which page it is that you're trying to get them to. What action are they meant to take? What category is best for them? So if they tell us that the homepage has too much happening on there and that they want a simplified version, we can say, okay, that's a hypothesis. We need a simplified homepage. So now we want to validate that through other data sources. So we might go and look at a heat map or a session recording, and we'll take a look at how far down the page are people scrolling, where are they clicking on that homepage. We'll use session recordings to watch the mouse and do a little bit of eye tracking to see what's the information architecture like and how are people digesting the content that's on the page. And then we'll also go and look at analytics to have a look at what's the time on site on a page. And if you have event tracking on that homepage to see like what is the scroll depth, to back it up with heat maps, and to also get an understanding of potentially like where is the actual user journey going within analytics. So from the homepage, what pages are they filtering through? And so that's how we then identify, yes, we're validating that this is a pattern that happens consistently, and this is a trend. And because it's been validated by multiple data sources, it becomes a much stronger hypothesis. If a hypothesis only has one data source that validates it, it usually goes at the bottom of the pile. The more data sources you have that validate a hypothesis, it goes to the top of the pile. And that's because when we actually go to start testing things, the stronger a hypothesis, the more likely it is not only to be a successful test, but the more likely it is to yield a larger increase in conversion rate and a statistically relevant result. So looking for trends and patterns is really, really critical. So the way that we usually do it is, this is a couple of photos from our office before we all had to go into isolation. But when we look at compiling all that data, it's very difficult just to do that in a spreadsheet. So we like to put it all onto a wall. It makes it look a little bit like a Picasso painting with all the colors. But we start grouping things. We're building concepts. So we look at things through pain points, through motivations, through completed steps. We are actually analyzing all of their different behaviors to see where those trends and patterns are. And then we start putting the post-it notes together. Because again, this is all very much the voice of the customer. These are their actual behaviors. And so the more that we can actually visualize that process, the easier it is for us to then distill it back down into some core hypotheses and group them together by, I guess, potential upswing. So we then usually put that into a very detailed report. I think the biggest one that we've ever done is probably about 151 pages. So we're not talking about light research here. This is really, really detailed stuff. But the idea is for every single page to be actionable, for us to have grouped data, for us to have grouped insights, for us to have found those patterns and trends. And then again, linking between the what and the why is to say, this is what we see that's happening, and this is the data supporting why it's happening, and this is what we're going to do about it. So the optimization strategy is one of the most important parts because, again, it's the actionable out of it. Because it's all good and well for you to have a wealth of data, but if you're not doing anything with it, then there's no point in having it in the first place. Now, research is the most critical part. A lot of people would say that testing is the most important part because that's where you start to get learnings. But we don't really believe in the concept of spaghetti testing, which is when you throw something against the wall and see what sticks. We want to be testing based on, again, the voice of the customer. What is it that they're telling us that they want? So we're trying to remove the opinion out of it of we believe that this will work, or we know who our customer is and what they want, and this is what we want to test, or our competitors are doing this, so we should be doing that. None of that is data-driven. And this is where research becomes the most important part, because if you get the research wrong and then you invest in testing in the long term, it's very likely that your tests will not be successful because your hypotheses will be wrong. If the research is wrong, the hypothesis is wrong. If the hypothesis is wrong, then ultimately your testing and optimization plan is wrong. There's nothing wrong with taking your time in doing the research. It's just so critical to your business because the research doesn't just inform your UX strategy. It can inform your email marketing strategy. It can inform your content strategy in terms of the types of questions that people are asking and the information that they want. It can inform your paid media strategy because you can update your ad copy and your ad creative to be targeted to the unique selling propositions that customers find most valuable. So because it's being integrated in so many different channels, and because your understanding of the customer is going to inform so many internal business decisions, there's no need to rush this component. And I think as you're kind of discussing conversion optimization and research with more senior members of the team, whether those are other internal stakeholders or might be C-suite, it's important to explain to them why research is such a critical component and why it's worthwhile taking an extra 2 or 3 weeks of research to make sure that the hypotheses that you're getting are really bang on. So that's when it actually goes into your A/B testing and website optimization plan. So usually when the research is done, it tells us one of two things. Number one, the website actually is in pretty good condition and we can just move into a testing strategy because there's probably some core concepts that we want to test, but it doesn't need a complete rebuild. The flip side to that is that we do the research and then what we find is that actually the website is in really bad shape. There's a lot of usability and functionality that needs to be improved and put onto the website, but that might not be possible on the current platform, or there's too many band-aid solutions and it would break things, or it's just too expensive. So usually what happens off the back of research is you provide a recommendation. Website's in good nick, let's do some testing. Website is falling apart, let's actually go through an entire website rebuild process and rebuild it from scratch. But all of that should be data-driven. That decision should not be made based on, again, personal feelings. It should be based on what is actually best for the what it is that your customers expect, right? Because you can save yourself a lot of money and not have to redesign a website and just run a couple of small tests. I think this becomes a really interesting process because as marketers and as e-com managers and as digital marketing managers, we're looking at the website every single day, which means there will be little things that you see that really frustrate you because you're seeing it every single day. But your customers don't see those same things. They're not looking at your website every single day. So the things that bother you might not actually be bothering them because they might come to your website maybe once a year, maybe once every 6 months, once a quarter, even if it's once a month. It's not, those little things might not be the things that irk them the most. It might be other bigger things, and then that's where the priority should be, and that's where the resourcing should go. But again, always tying it back into data. Why should you be doing that? Well, that's what the data tells you. So that's it from me. That gives you a little bit of a 101 on conversion optimization. I hope there's a couple things that you found interesting that you learned about. I think given that we're kind of in coronavirus times and there's a lot of uncertainty for a lot of brands and a lot of businesses around what it is that they should be doing, it's an excellent time to be investing in understanding the customer and what it is that they expect from you as a brand. What are the changes that they want on your website? Because more than ever, understanding our customers is what sets us apart from our competitors. And I think we're able to craft significantly better digital strategies now than ever before because we have access to that data. So I hope that everyone's keeping well again, and thank you so much for your time. My voice is going.